Pretty good? Okay, so I'm going to be presenting on basically the global economic impact of Muslim travel. So when we talk about the Muslim economy, so one of the key contributor obviously is travel. And so in the past, no one has actually quantified the whole contribution of Muslim travel. So what we did actually last year, we released a report which quantifies basically the GDP contribution, the tax contribution, the number of jobs it creates, as well as the future impact and projection which we expect from Muslim travel itself. So let's have a look at the whole contribution. So that's something which we will be presenting, or I'll be presenting today. If you have any question, feel free to tweet me anytime. So this is my Twitter, as well as TRIPFEZ. Please follow us. So when you compare, let's say from 2009 up to now, the global economy has been not doing so well. But when we look at the whole tourism aspect, it's been growing very, very well. So from 2009, for example, the whole total growth was about 37% in inflation-adjusted terms, outpacing the global average GDP growth. So if you look at the whole graph, you can see that the global average is around 2%. And travel and tourism, as well as financial services, has been growing steadily. But looking at the whole aspect of travel itself, let's have a look at the whole, let's say, where growth has been within the travel industry. So if you look at the whole graph, you can see that this is a report released by the WTTC, the World Travel and Tourism Council. And they release a report every year which looks at the growth of the whole travel industry. Now, looking at the whole graph, you can see that Southeast Asia is basically one of the fastest growing, followed by South Asia, North Asia, and Middle East. Now, this specific region, or this region, has a growing demand, or basically a huge population of Muslim people living in it. So we can conclude that the whole growth, or the next growth within the next 10 years, is within the Muslim, or the Islamic economy, as we call it. Now, this region has basically Muslim huge population. It houses young population as well as a swelling middle class. So this two aspects fuels the whole travel industry. Now, looking at the whole Muslim economy, I think that's something which we've been talking about the whole day. It's estimated to be worth 1.8 trillion, and it's expected to grow to 2.6 trillion within the next 4 years. Now, this is a huge amount, and this is a number which was released on Thomson Reuters. So every year they do a study on the global economic impact of basically the Muslim economy. So it's a huge number, and what I'm going to do today is actually I'm going to focus on travel itself, Muslim travel to be specific. So Muslim travel has always been a key sector for economic development and jobs creation. Now, throughout the whole year of 2015, it generated about 139 billion in terms of GDP, as well as created 4.5 million jobs. Now, this is a huge amount, and within the next 10 years, what we expect to see is that it will remain as the fastest growing travel segment, as well as continuously outperform the global economy. So there's a huge potential. If anyone wants to basically be involved in travel, I think this is one of the key sectors that you can actually focus on. Now, looking at the whole Muslim travel itself, what does Muslim travel actually mean? So we define it as basically the availability of facilities, option, as well as information that allow Muslim travelers to continuously observe the tenet of Islam throughout the journey and avoid element that is deemed as haram. So this is a very loose definition of travel itself, but when you combine it with, let's say, the whole concept of travel, it allows people to actually, what it means to say that it allows people to perform, basically perform their daily prayers, perform all the obligations, what is in Islam, at the same time avoid things which are deemed haram. So what we did was we took a look at 19 individual economies, including Europe, which represent a total of 80% of the global Muslim travel market. What was the result? So let's have a look at the inbound tourism expenditure. Now, expenditure here means is that what people spend. So looking at the whole expenditure itself, you can see that within USA and EU, it represents about 44% of the global Muslim travel market. Now, this is around 64 billion of inbound expenditure throughout the whole year of 2015. This is a huge amount. And taking a look at basically the ASEAN, as well, the Asian as well as the Middle Eastern market, This represents around 37%, which is a third of the whole total inbound expenditure. This specific region, ASEAN as well as the Middle East, is expected to robustly grow within the next decade. And I highlighted Malaysia in this case, so you can see that Malaysia ranks not so bad. I mean, 3.3 billion in terms of expenditure for Muslim travel throughout the whole year of 2015. Outbound. Now, outbound here means when basically the market which actually spends when they go out of the country. So the Middle Eastern market makes up about 60% of the global market, netting nearly 60 billion of outbound spending, followed by Asia as well as Europe. Now, what this graph actually shows is that countries such as Saudi Arabia, UAE, Iran, Indonesia are basically, within the next 10 years, represent the whole growth within the travel market. Now, these are countries which has a huge population of basically Muslim, Let's have a look at the GDP impact. So there's a huge big impact on direct GDP for basically the United States as well as Europe, 26.5 billion USD in total. Now, this direct GDP involves business receiving inbound tourist spending. So when you go to places, what you'll do is actually you'll spend. You'll spend on hotel, you spend on restaurant, you spend on tours, you'll spend on airlines and local transport and retailers. So these are direct GDP contribution. So you can see that a lot of Muslims actually goes to the US, the EU, but not only going there, but we're actually spending there. So that's the most important thing. When you look at tourism in a whole, two aspects is what matters for the whole, for the tourism board. The number of visitors as well as the total spending. So these are the two sectors or the two key features which people look at. And as you can see, in the US as well as in the EU, a lot of Muslims are actually spending there. Muslim travel basically, I mean, if you want to look at it in the whole aspect, you have to look at the whole percentage, what is influenced over the total inbound, basically. So you can see that basically the whole contribution is influenced by the overall size of each tourism sector of each country. So the importance of Muslim travel demand can be estimated basically by comparing its GDP footprint to that of all inbound travelers. Now, Malaysia is about 70%. That's a huge amount. So 70% of all inbound travelers actually contributes directly to the GDP, comes from Muslim travel. So in countries such as Iran, Saudi Arabia, which are obviously a lot of Muslim traveling there. But what is fascinating, I want to point out, is that actually countries such as the US, which is about 70%, roughly around Malaysia's amount. So this is very interesting because the US is predominantly non-Muslim. It's a country where it's not, how do you say it, like completely Muslim majority or supporting the facilities and stuff, but it actually has a huge impact, a huge amount of GDP impact. So this is the region. So you can see that the Middle East nations witnessed the highest share of tourism GDP from Muslim travelers. But what makes it fascinating is that countries or region in America is about 70%. This is a huge amount. Direct employment. So looking at the whole Muslim travel itself, you can see that Muslim tourism in this magnitude support many jobs. So now when you use the ratio of employment to GDP in relevant sector of each country, you can basically estimate that Muslim travel supports 1.8 million jobs around the world, direct employment. Now, interestingly, Malaysia is around 85,000, which is a huge amount. So 85,000, it supports directly 85,000 employment within this, to support this specific sector. Tax revenues. So when you look at, see the demand, everything can only happen when there's a demand. You can only create a product when there's no demand, there's no point, because then it will not be supported, then you can't basically generate revenue, which is the ultimate purpose of a company. So the majority of the Muslim tourism tax impact basically benefits Europe and America because of the high nature of tax system there. So you can see the EU and the US predominantly dominates this whole sector. And within Malaysia, for example, directly it contributes about 450 million US dollar. GDP and jobs of the Muslim supply chain. So in the countries we studied, the supply chain represents 38 billion of GDP and support 1.3 million jobs. So not only does it support employment within the travel sector. See, the interesting thing about travel is that it supports all the other different sectors. For example, agriculture, the food which you bring in to the tourist, manufacturing, the professional services, transport, hospitality. There's a range of sector which basically Muslim travel supports. Looking at the GDP itself has little meaning, but when you add up the whole GDP impact from all the different sectors, it has a lot more meaning and it has more value to the whole number. So now this is basically the total GDP of Muslim tourist economy in 2015. So as you can see, within the US economy, it contributes about 50.8 billion. The EU around 34 billion, and to Malaysia itself, it's around $2.7 billion. So that's why in Malaysia itself, you have the Ministry of Tourism created specifically the Islamic Tourism Center, which purposely or main goal or main aim is actually to promote Muslim travel throughout within Malaysia and bring more tourists into Malaysia. So the total GDP of Muslim tourist economy within the US and EU is basically more than 50% of the GDP impact across all nations, total impact of totaling 85 billion, and then it represents more than 10% of the overall inbound tourism market. Total employment of Muslim tourist economy. So interestingly, labor-intensive economies across Asia and the Middle East basically benefits the most. Muslim travel demand supports a whole range of jobs, and more than 50% of total employment is attributed to Asia. Now, because Asia, or Asian Middle East, has a huge labor-intensive economy, so there's a lot of employees. Because of the cheap labor, it supports a lot of employment within this specific market. And Muslim inbound travelers supports around 2.3 million jobs in Asia in 2015 and around 4 million jobs throughout the whole world. Now, interestingly, I'd like to point out that countries such as Thailand, for example, so Thailand is comparatively to, say, China, Asia, China, the US, India, and EU, is not as big as those countries. But what is interesting is that it supports around 540,000 jobs. Now, this is because the whole nature of the Thailand economy, which actually is predominantly based on tourism. Does that mean 10 minutes or? Okay, opportunities. Now, this is very interesting. Now, this is something which I'd like to highlight. And if you have any question, feel free. We can make this very interactive. So, the high spending power is what creates the opportunity within the Muslim economy to actually focus on travel. Now, travel itself, for example, if you take the combined tourism economy of Malaysia, Thailand, Singapore, and Indonesia, it totals about $13.2 billion. And this demand is what makes what makes NTO, National Tourism Board, the National Promotional Board, or countries such as Vietnam, Korea, are focusing a lot on Muslim travel. Now, if you look at the picture, now this is very interesting. And this is something which I'm not sure if you came across this. Now, this is one of the earliest tickets by Thomas Cook. So Thomas Cook is basically a tour operator. You can actually go to them and buy tours. Now, this is a ticket from 1886. And this is basically a tour to Mecca, to Jeddah, to perform the Hajj. And this was done by Thomas Cook, which is a company based in the UK, back in the 1800s, when no one else is actually focusing a lot on Muslim travel. So this basically shows that, let's say, outside of Muslim majority countries, it's something which is already focused on. People has always been interested in this specific sector. Let's have a look at the future trends. So travel itself is very important for a lot of people. So statistically it shows that people travel at least 3 times a year. So you either go to visit your relative, you either go out, honeymoon, spend time with your friends, but people actually do travel. So in Malaysia, on average, people travel 3 times a year. And nowadays, traveling is not just about you pick a place. Traveling is about demand. So you want, for example, hotels are going eco-friendly because there's a huge demand for eco-friendliness. The same goes with Muslim travel. There's a huge demand for this specific sector, which makes a lot of the product being localized and taking demand very, very serious. Now, this is a picture at Kansai Airport. Now, Kansai is in Japan. Now, there's literally, or at least very, very small Muslim population in Japan itself, or literally none, which are local. Most of them are either immigrants or, but in the end, it's a very small percentage. But they see a huge opportunity within this specific space or sector. That's why if you go to the airport, you'll find halal restaurant. At the same time, you also find prayer rooms. These little features are created basically to make Muslims feel at home when they travel to countries such as Japan. And next is the Golden Peacock, Macau, Venetian. It's basically a restaurant in the Venetian itself, which is a gambling place, basically. It's a gambling place in Macau. Macau is known for gambling. But within this specific conglomerate of gambling empire, you have a 1 Michelin star restaurant which actually serves halal food. So why is it there? It's because there's a huge demand. I mean, not everyone goes to Macau to do gambling. So there's a lot of Muslims wanting to travel there, and they see a huge potential that they actually created a halal restaurant there. Traveling to, let's say you travel a little bit south to Hong Kong, in Hong Kong itself, you'll see they are opening up, I think at the end of next year, a halal hotel. So when you stay at Disneyland Hong Kong, you can actually stay at this specific place and then you can find halal food. Again, this is very interesting because Geneva, for example, Geneva in Switzerland is a very small city. You barely can walk. You could basically walk to the end of the city in 1 hour. But if you go to the hotels, a lot of the hotels actually have the Qibla direction because they see these are little features which you can add to make the whole Muslim travel experience more exciting. This is very interesting because I recently had a talk in Singapore. So when I was talking to, I think, the vice president of TripAdvisor, so I was telling her, if you look up in your room in Singapore, you'll see an arrow. That arrow is actually pointing to Mecca. So she found that very interesting because initially, when she came into her room, she thought it was an exit sign and was pointing to the window. So if there's a fire, you jump out the window. So she thought that was very, very informative as well as interesting. So some sweet stats. Now, demand is very important when you create a product, when you venture into a specific industry. So we did a survey and we found out that 81% of Muslims basically are searching for Muslim-friendly amenities. And this includes, you want to go to a place and you want to find there is halal food available. When you go to Gold Coast, for example, there are certain places where you can actually pre-order your sahur. You go to Indonesia or you go to Bali, for example, you can actually pre-order certain restaurants, certain hotels. Basically, you can pre-order the sahur at 4 o'clock in the morning. So not all hotel provides that. Sites, basically, or websites that display Muslim amenities increase engagement by 147% in respective target market. 70% of Muslim travelers think that more information is important. So in this modern age, I think information is really, really important. You want to know when you go to a place, what is available there, what is not available, what do they provide, what do they not provide, and etc. So concluding this whole thing, you can see that Muslim travel is an important element or an important aspect of the whole Muslim or Islamic economy, and it's often cited as a fast-growing, high-potential segment of the tourism market. There's a huge opportunity within this specific space if you want to venture into it, but it also delivers important socio-economic benefit across the world. The segment offers basically high opportunities. At the same time, it could be challenging as the market is not homogeneous and quite fragmented over different countries. What is fascinating to basically a lot of the countries in Europe and in the US, this specific segment is interesting because no matter where you're from, whether you're from China or you're from Timbuktu, or whether you're from South Africa, but when you're a Muslim, there's a few feature elements which combines or which unite everyone basically. There's a few features which you're looking for. This fragmented market, at the same time, Yep, 1 minute. This fragmented market basically creates not only a challenge, but also an opportunity for you to actually venture into this specific space. Okay, so what we do, just in short, basically we work with hotels, we work with NTOs to basically work with the hotels to actually display this information for Muslim travelers. So when you travel, I want to provide that information that when you travel, before you travel basically, you can find out what hotel has what, which hotels offers halal food, which hotels offers amenities, and etc. So we work with around 55,000 hotels across 50 countries. We just got, I think, 2 major OTAs adopting it just yesterday, so which is really, really exciting for us. So what you can do for me, or for us basically, or for the Ummah, is basically when you go to the next hotel, when you stay at your next hotel, try and find this specific symbol at the hotel, or if they don't have it, try and tell them. The more demand you create, the more opportunity basically you have to actually find this specific information on other travel sites. And that's our goal. Our goal is not to have the information on our site, but basically to enable other travel sites. When you go to, let's say, your favorite booking site, you'll find the information which hotel has what. Yep, got it. Thank you. Any questions?
Assalamualaikum.
Salam.
Okay, just a quick question. You mentioned hotels. What about Airbnbs? Because that's the next big thing right now. Do you work with them? Airbnbs, university campuses, that sort of things.
At the moment, we don't specifically work with Airbnb because there is, see, within the hotel space itself, there is a challenge to combine the information. So as a consumer, it seems very simple that when you go to a hotel, you select the hotel, but at the back end, it's very complicated. So one of the biggest challenges in the travel industry is basically unifying or mapping every single hotel to the exact same hotel. So that's quite a challenge for Airbnb that if you were to venture into it. So for example, when you go to, let's say, Agoda, and you go to booking.com, and you take Traders Hotel, for example, it has a different name. So it could be Traders Hotel Kuala Lumpur, Traders Hotel by Shangri-La, Traders Hotel at Kuala Lumpur. So there's a few names, and mapping this is quite difficult. But when we move into the Airbnb space, which is lesser regulated, it becomes a little bit more complicated. I mean, in the long run, I think that's something which we would look into, but at the moment, we don't specifically focus a lot on it. Any other questions?
Thank you so much. I'm Amin from Iran, from the Shafaq Accelerator, first Islamic, specifically accelerator, Iran. Can you compare the market size of Islamic tourism with other religion-based tourism, like Christianity or Jewish or other religions?
We haven't done that in the past because, except Jewish is small. I mean, it's a small number of Jewish people globally. The next big comparison is basically Christianity. But in Christianity, there is lesser demand of, let's say, things. So as a Muslim, you have a little bit more demand. Like, for example, you want to find halal hotel, halal food, you want to find the Qibla direction, you have to pray, so you will need then the praying time. But when you look at Christianity, it's lesser of a demand. So we haven't done that in the past, but I think it's something which is very, very interesting to look at.
Thank you so much.
Any other question? You can ask me anything in travel, basically. I think he's signaling me to end. But one last question.
Actually, in terms of your business model, is it to start to use your logo and the fact you're associated with hotels to draw in customers to those hotels? And have you started doing that? Are you seeing traction in the Muslim world where people are being encouraged to travel because you show that there are amenities available in that location?
No, I think the thing with travel is that people, when they travel, they want to see new things, but at the same time, they want to feel at home. So there's a few things that you still want to do as a Muslim. You want to still be able to pray. You want to still be able to fast. You want to still be able to find halal food. So what we're doing is basically enabling, basically Muslim, to travel to countries such as Mongolia and still be able to perform their daily duties, to be able to perform their obligation in Islam. So that's what we want to do. So we worked a lot with hotels and the National Tourism Board to basically promote this specific concept so that when Muslim travel, they can actually find this. But at the same time, what we want to do is actually we want to quantify the whole demand and create this huge demand and put it into a specific, focus. So that when there's more demand, you have more initiative from non-Muslim countries such as Japan, Australia, Canada and all that to actually cater for this demand. So you want to be able to go to Canada and still be able to find halal food. That's the whole ultimate goal, and that's what we want to do. Basically to create this demand, to quantify this demand, and using this demand basically to drive this specific sector of the economy. If there's any other question, you can always tweet me or write to us anytime. We welcome any feedback as well as suggestion. Basically anything that can actually promote Muslim tourism or tourism at large. Thank you.